3, 2, 1.
So I wanted to just do a quick little video on my 2004 Nicky Hayden edition RC51. So basically I had an issue where it looked like I was running out of gas because I saw my gas gauge flicker, and I don't recall if my FI light came on as well. But then all of a sudden while riding, I lost power, and that was it. Now I initially thought that I was out of gas, so I was able to roll the bike into a parking lot, call CAA, they put more gas in, wouldn't start. So the fuel pump would prime, you could hear the engine trying to turn over, but there was no spark. Well, at that time I didn't realize there was no spark, it just wouldn't start. So what I ended up doing is having to get the bike towed home, and then once home it sat for a while until I started doing some diagnosis. So did the usual stuff. I pulled the plugs, tested, and sure enough, no spark. So then using some online resources and also some videos of doing some basic testing, a lot of things that could cause this issue, check your fuses. So while I have everything off, you have 1, 2, 3. These are kind of like your main fuses. I think they also, and someone could correct me if I'm wrong, they're the same fuses, and they could also control the headlights. So a lot of times people say when the bike doesn't start, if it's a blown fuse, the headlight won't come on either. I think it'll crank, but there's no ignition. So I swapped days around, tested them, my lights were on, everything was there, so it wasn't that. Like I said, when I pulled the plugs, I knew I wasn't getting any spark, but again, I still didn't want to jump to any conclusions as to what the issue was. So looking at a couple other videos, what I did was I came to see if my voltage regulator was working. Prior to that, I actually tested my battery. Battery was good, had good volts, but I couldn't test if there's any charging going on just because it wouldn't start. So I disconnected here. I disconnected this side, and I did some testing. So you basically take, once this is off, and on this side, you put your positive lead connecting to one of the red wires, then the other red wire. I think that is supposed to measure voltage from the regulator, and you take the negative portion and you put it to your battery from your voltmeter and see if you're getting a reading. So you do that with both wires. Then you do the same with the green wire to see if you get a reading. I don't recall what the normal reading was. And then here you have your black wire, which is, you got to test your ohms. This will tell you if you have a break in the line somewhere in your ignition. I believe this is responsible for ignition. So I was getting an ohms reading here. For these ones, when you're testing these wires, you want to check to see if you got DC volts. Again, people can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure there's people out there much more in tune with the RC51 and checking electronics more than me. But anyhow, I tested these tested fine. So it looks like there wasn't any break in the line. Voltage was getting to the battery, even though the bike wouldn't start. That was how I tested it. I think there's further tests you could do for your voltage regulator, but at that point I narrowed it down. The other thing that you want to do is this is how you test your codes, where you take a jumper wire and you connect it from there to that other one. Let me see if I could find my wire, just to give you guys an example. All right, well, I'm not too sure where it is right now, but basically that is it. So if you take a wire and you jump these two connectors and you turn the bike on, your FI light will come on and it'll start to blink. You got to count the blinks. So one slow blink is the first number. Fast blinks are your second digit. If you only get fast blinks, for example, I only got number 9. So I got 9 blinks on my FI, which ended up being my IAT sensor, but I think it's an old reading just because there's nothing wrong with my IT sensor, then yeah. So even diagnosing, trying to use the codes, it didn't tell me what my issue was. The other issue that sometimes people have is this. This is your tip over sensor. So I disconnected the tip over sensor, still, and I jumped the cables. So this way it acted like it doesn't even exist. And still the bike still had those symptoms where got crank, I hear the fuel pump running, but no spark. The other thing I forgot to mention, if you have a power commander, run it through, lift the tank where it connects underneath, and disconnect it, and then try to start it. Because sometimes it is your power commander that's just not working and can cause similar symptoms. So finally, what it ended up being, and as much of you people already know, if you have a RC51 or a VTR or any of the other V-twins that uses the CDI box, this is a weak point for the entire system. So I ended up getting this as my replacement, and now, sure enough, the bike fires right up. Now, there is a procedure to repair this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my old one, I'm going to repair it. If you do a search for repair CDI RC51, you're going to see what's required. Let's look at my old one, so you guys could kind of maybe walk you through it. So basically, if you go online, it'll tell you there's, I think it's in this corner right here. So you got to remove this kind of like top layer, and be very careful while removing it. You could try to slowly heat it up and just kind of like scrape away at it. And when you get underneath, there's, I think they're called resistors. There's 4 of them. And neck 3S4M and then a 5S4M or something along those lines. So there's 4 of them. So what you do is you could order them off of AliExpress or a reputable shop. I had a really difficult time trying to find the transistors. I was able to source some on eBay, and then the other ones I just got from AliExpress. And if they work, great. If not, I'll just order more. But it was really difficult to find some, even from my local shops. Anyhow, so once you do that, it's just you put those, you remove the other ones, they're soldered in, put the new ones, there's a top layer that goes back on, like it screws on to keep the transistors in place. You solder the new ones in, and then you just fill it up with silicone. I'll put the link in the description below, but that'll repair this, and so I'll have a spare. Because trying to find these right now, they are not cheap. This one cost me $500 US. And it is, for all intents and purposes, new. But anyhow, that's pretty much it. You could try to find a used one, source a used one, be a little cheaper, but you might run into the same problem. So I still don't know what necessarily caused this to fail. It could have been just its time, because again, this is a weak point. However, that is pretty much it. So those of you who have come across the issue where your bike turns over, your bike tries to turn over, so it sounds like the ignition's working, so you're getting if your fuel pump is priming, your lights work, the ignition seems to work because it's triggering everything to try to turn on, but it just won't crank over, won't turn over. And then you test to see if you don't have spark. Like again, follow the procedures I kind of told you, do your due diligence first, but more than likely, that'll be the culprit. So I'm gonna take an opportunity to clean this up and put the plastics back on and finally be able to go for a ride again. Meanwhile, my other bikes are down, but I'll do a video on those another time. Cheers.